It is the early 1940s. The war rages in Europe and the Pacific. People are tense and anxious in the United States. In the heartland, Kansas City, Missouri, Charlton Fortune has begun a lecture on art, and, as it will turn out, on her life as well. Who am I? She will tell you. What am I doing here? She will tell you that as well. But I will give you a hint on both questions. I am her loyal friend and frequent theological adversary. Quite frequent. So the lecture begins, or rather, continues.
A section of a fresco by Piera della Francesca, Discovery and Proving of the True Cross, painted mid-15th century. Note the powerful diagonal plane created by the cross and figures, set against the vertical lines of the buildings to the right. The circular and rounded shapes, like the human figures, keep the eye moving through the painting, holding our interest. None of this is an accident, all thought out. And Della Francesca brought his love of mathematics and geometry to his art. I think you can see this. It looks very geometric. A powerful composition, important, because despite what some may tell you, ecclesiastical art is exactly the same as any other art, except for subject matter. Fine professional painting of the most supreme importance, the ability to paint superbly well, say, a lemon on a plate, as Manet can do so beautifully, is the best preparation for any religious subject. I mentioned this in a lecture I give in a seminary, shocked one of the students, scandalized, I think, my discussing God in conjunction with a lemon. Your lecturer, Charlton Fortune. I prefer to introduce myself a little into the lecture. Introductions by others are nice, but often a bit too effusive. Some will tell you I use the initial to disguise my gender, but actually, it is to disguise my given name, Euphemia. Still, many women artists do use initials to hide the fact that they are women. It's a matter of survival if you want to have any chance in the competitions. And if the judges know you are a woman and still judge you to be any good, it's because they say you paint like a man. One reviewer said of me, her work is unusually strong for a woman, having the vigorous brushstroke attributed to men only. Well, I ask you, what am I to do? Develop a weak brushstroke? Still, there's a danger in using initials. For instance, in 1927, I won a medal in the Paris Salon. A nice moment in my rather mixed career. The award certificate read, "To Monsieur Fortune." Monsieur Fortune is preferable, by the way, to Miss Fortune. Anyway, friends call me Effie, much nicer. This lecture, as you know, is Notes on Art for Catholics. But it's good to remind you as we go along, since I do get sidetracked. Non-Catholics might also benefit from this lecture, but I feel the world might benefit from understanding and appreciating art. Mind you, I'm not liberal about this subject. There's a fallacy that anyone with a pair of eyes is capable of deciding what is good or bad in art. That is, may I say, a way of letting you know at the tea afterwards. Is there tea afterward, Edwin?
Yes, in the lobby.
Ah, in the lobby. After the lecture. Should be lovely. Not in the rectory.
No, sorry. Support Guild's replastering the room. Wouldn't want plaster drifting into the tea, would we?
Oh, no. This, by the way, is Edwin O'Hara, Distinguished Bishop of Kansas City, Missouri. I was saying...
A way of letting you know.
Oh, thank you. No, I know what I like, unless it comes from an informed basis. And if you come from an informed basis, you won't say, I know what I like. You may wonder why the bishop sits nearby. He's here in case you may have questions about religion I am unable to answer.
Trust me, she'll try anyway.
But the most important reason, the projector jamming. It does sometimes, and I'm terrible with machines.
That's so.
Oh, it jammed a dozen times in Portsmouth, Rhode Island.
In Boston, it jammed, and then the light bulb burned out, so we adjourned early for tea.
And if I get off track, Edwin can steer me back. Isn't that so?
I try.
If I faint, I did once. It was Cleveland in August. Bishop O'Hara to the rescue.
It was St. Louis, Effie.
Excuse me?
You fainted in St. Louis.
In August?
You recall they installed a tub in the cathedral vestibule, so you could bathe, and when the heat became unbearable.
Oh, yes, I plunged in every 2 hours.
Except the day you forgot and got caught up in your painting and didn't jump in, suffered prostration. You scared us that time.
Did I?
Of course, very much. You were ill. Even Rome heard of it.
Rome?
The Pope himself. Didn't you know?
No.
Oh, right. We thought it would go to your head if you heard the Holy Father was concerned.
Well, if I'd known.
Oh, the lecture, Effie.
Holy Father. My goodness. Here is the entrance to Kansas City's William Rockhill Nelson Gallery of Art. Many of the works of art you will see this evening are housed in this museum. A surprise for the bishop. I am adding a few extra slides to today's lecture, freshening it up.
Are you?
Oh, not so many. I add images because the war grows worse in Europe. So maybe we need to talk about things other than just art. I know the war is on your minds. How could it not be? We can't just ignore it, pretend it isn't. And my brother Jim is over in, well, I don't know. North Africa, perhaps Burma. An engineer searching for oil for the war effort. Jim's second war. No longer young. And we haven't heard from him for some time. And Jim takes chances, so I worry. So I would like to discuss some things that bear on art, mine and others, that I usually don't talk about. This falls in our usual parameter, a stone sculpture of a lion to be found in the museum's classical gallery. Greek, 4 centuries before Christ. A few wars since then. Chinese lion, the 7th century after Christ, in the Chinese gallery, of course. As far apart from conception as China from Greece. Both distinctly different from the image of a real lion. Snapped this photograph the other day in your zoo. Handsome gloop, isn't he? Lazy, too. These statues resemble our lion only remotely as subject matter, but as to its attributes. But absolutely as to its attributes. Kingliness and ferocity depicted to the point of exaggeration through economy of design. The deliberate discarding of non-essential details. Details may be seen in the absolutely truthful product of the camera, which reduces our lion to the importance of a dog on a hearth rug. You'll note that this is not a Catholic photograph any more than the previous image was a Catholic sculpture. In fact, this is the sort of fellow who made a habit of eating Catholics.
Something we'd like to keep in the past, Effie? Lions eating Catholics.
Today, of course, we toss in Lutherans, Baptists, Methodists, and Catholics. A kind of lions Christians do. You might as well know the bishop and I had a tussle over the title of this lecture, over the word Catholic. I thought it should be simply Notes on Art. I'm quite proud of being Catholic. I like being Catholic. But I truly feel that art is for everyone, as God is for everyone. A pagan may be taken by a Catholic artwork, as we may be charmed by a pagan work of art. If you take my meaning.
Aye, that we do, Effie, my dear.
I won't budge from that. When people lecture, we need to know where they come from, what gives them their point of view, what makes them the way they are, if we're to credit them at all. My memory of April 18th, 1906, the San Francisco earthquake and fire, painted a year later, because time is needed to distill ideas and emotions. Why artists often paint from memory? The reporter, the news photographer says, I must get it now. The artist can take her time, let the images filter through the unconscious. It lacks certain details. Buildings falling, people running, the odor of burning flesh. I'm not altogether happy with it, yet one can sense the terror, I hope, the where to run. One can paint terror, never doubt it. Not me, but the great artists can. Goya, for instance, he understood flesh and pain. Artists such as Goya, one envies them, but one doesn't. The same painting, Closer, reminds us of what's going on in Europe. London's burning. In London, I saw Sarah Bernhardt's Camille. 5 times I saw Isadora Duncan dance, in London and again in Paris. Her mastery of self-expression, I found it stunning, moving. I'd never seen anything like it. That was before the First War. Bernhardt's dead, as is Duncan. One can hardly forget Duncan is dead the way she died, the scarf tangled in the car wheel. What is this, you may well ask? It's still that night. We tore off pieces of rag, Mother and I, wrote our names and addresses, pinned them to our coats. Should we have died that night, our identity might be known. We discovered many people did this. For them, us. Death was not as great a fear as anonymity, of bodies being disposed of anonymously. I've never forgotten that. They dynamited our house that night to halt the progress of the fire. Our house was one of the many to be destroyed that way. It almost worked. We became refugees, lived in tents for months. Many homes destroyed that night. Many lives. Much art, Catholic and otherwise.
Effie, what are you thinking? It's in bad taste.
It happens.
I don't care.
It has a point, like the fire. And when you compare it with what's going on in Europe, the death everywhere.
Well, if you really feel you must.
Thank you. Victim of a shooting, not San Francisco, front of a New York restaurant some years ago. A gangster. The moment the shooting takes place, I am having dinner inside with another distinguished clergyman, an archbishop. The Archbishop, a sketch. Another Irishman to boot. A lovely man. With a still? No, alas. Where then? With the angels, I think. Just before the shooting, we're talking, the Archbishop and I say, where, Archbishop, are the great Catholic artists of the past? The Leonardos, the Michelangelos, the Raphaels? He replies over a glass of wine. Edwin?
Effie?
You've heard me tell it enough times. Be the Archbishop. The Archbishop says... Oh, come on, Edwin.
Really, Effie, if Rome knew I was impersonating an archbishop.
You've done it before.
But not in front of people, really. I didn't expect that.
Please.
Must I? Well, here goes. If you feel that way about it, Effie, my dear. Well, that's how he talked.
Bring it down a little. He wasn't all that Irish.
If you feel that way about it, Effie, my dear.
Better.
Thank you. Then why don't you do something about it? Be our Leonardo.
Well, that brings me up short. I look at him. Give up my art, my impressionism, turn to religious art. Was I to do that? Start over at my age? Is that what you're suggesting, Archbishop?
Well, look, Effie, you posed the question, didn't you? And what's your art got you, other than venom from critics and looked down on painted by women? They say women artists haven't the genius of men, and they ignore you. Well, let them try to ignore your work for the church. We'll put you there with the Leonardos and the Michelangelos. You'll decorate the great churches and cathedrals across this country. And let's face it, Effie, we need you. Catholic art in this country has become almost as poor as Protestant art.
Well, it's a fair argument. Still, I have my doubts. But then the shooting happens. Someone who probably deserves shooting. That's what the newspapers imply. But I somehow think that if that gangster is not murdered outside that restaurant on that night, perhaps I would have taken a different path with what remains of my life. Looks martyred, the blood that way. Maybe that was it. What do you think? The Archbishop bravely goes out, administers last rites. Yes, the gangster was a Catholic. Then returns, and we have dinner. I remember being fascinated by, he doesn't know it's there, a blood stain on the right cuff of the Archbishop's shirt. Can't take my eyes off it. He says, Archbishop thinks my eye is downcast from trauma. He says, Effie, it happens. Then he reaches across with his right hand and takes mine. And all I can see is, well, the blood on his sleeve. As you can see, this is without a head, and therefore without facial expression, which is so important to the layman. Well, I'm sorry, but without a head, we simply can't have a face, can we? But I say, doesn't it leave a lot to the imagination? Doesn't it excite the imagination? It's Maitreya, Chinese, 7th century, found in the Tianlangshan caves. This little statue is the worthy ancestor of the Romanesque figures of Christ, found in French medieval churches. A tympanum, Cathedral of Chartres. Notice the draped clothing, sensuous line of the legs. In both pieces, this is, of course, Christ, the other, some deity. Sculpture in relief is stone cut away from a background. A splendid example of low or bas-relief, the tribute bearer from Persepolis, done 5th century before Christ. Is it not passing brave? a figure to have inspired Marlowe. Another bas-relief, Virgin and Child, carved 20 centuries after our Persepolis figure. Greater variation of planes or levels, so more fluid, less compact in design. Variety and color are obtained by undercutting for shadows. Of color, for what I was once known for. Summer morning, St. Ives. Paris Salon silver medal, médaille d'argent, to Monsieur Fortune. Silver is second, but I was happy to have it. Sort of work I used to do. St. Ives. Oh, the color and life, reds and blues and yellows, gull wings beating the air, blood on the fish cleaners' leather aprons, peasant girls in their print scarves, coarse language and pendulous breasts, little ponies pulling carts of fish up from the beach, leaning into their traces until their hearts crack and give out, cut from their traces. Fishermen waiting to go out. I noted the oddest thing. The fishermen pacing on the beach, walking 4 paces, then turning, walking 4 paces, then turning, back and forth, on and on. Do you see? Do you see, Edwin? They were walking the length of their boats. The woman in the straw hat and the rose blouse carrying the basket. I think I imagined her to be me, alone as usual, without the cleft palate, of course. You notice that? Childhood birth defect. Reason I prefer shadow. Perhaps why I rail against facial expression. You think? Had a nerve, didn't I, making her attractive? I've always kept my figure. That part's true. I didn't want to be alone. No one really wants to be alone. I had a pal then, Ethel. We were best friends. She was back in San Francisco. Is it not breathtaking? A Spanish altarpiece from a church in Valencia. Spain and Mexico, countries rich in liturgical art, make us look clumsy by comparison. I am redoing the altar here at St. Peter's. I will be borrowing from this, being so beautiful. My friend Ethel, whom I told you about, a black and white image, so difficult to guess her hair color. Red then, she had freckles. The first time I saw her was here, Point Lobos, Point of the Sea Wolves, near Carmel, California, a place to this day much favored by artists. Ethel wore a pale blue dress, kind of smock with paint spots, looked as much boy as girl. She was late for the first day of my painting class and had forgotten her paint box. I had just sent the class down to the beach to paint the waves. Ethel was nervous, out of breath, very young, 2 years younger than myself. I'm sure to her I seemed ancient. I'm sorry, you're the last to arrive, so you must be Ethel McAllister. And you've forgotten your paint box. I must say, it makes one question your seriousness. But I am serious. I am passionate to paint. They say you send people away. You mustn't send me away. I want to learn from you. I said, well, nothing. Because something caught my attention on the beach, the roar of an incoming wave, and at that moment, a glimpse of a white dress of one of my students at the water's edge. I held my breath. I don't remember closing my eyes, but I remember opening them. The white dress was still there, the girl in it wet, and laughing. Laughing! The others, too. Oh, sometimes they can be so stupid. But oh, the relief I felt. I was trembling. I rushed to the edge of the bluff, yelled down my loudest at my students, startling them, and Ethel too, I'm sure. Ladies, do not turn your back on the sea, ever, ever, for it will come up behind you and kill you. Then I turned on Ethel. Do you hear me? Do you understand, Ethel McAllister? Quite frightened her, I'm sure. I was angry at myself, of course. I'd been so taken by Ethel's passion to paint, I had neglected the safety of my students. Well, sometimes we're lucky and we forget that, don't we? Head of the Virgin, 14th century fresco, northern Italy, dark hair, almond eyes. What soft, gentle eyes, very beautiful. I think Moody Didoni might have seen this fresco, perhaps as a boy, the image staying with him. What do you think? Fresco, a method of applying paint directly to wet plaster, most successful in countries where climatic conditions ensure its permanency, such as Italy. Art not cared for, ages just as we do. The Virgin would become an old lady and, like us, eventually turn to dust, which wouldn't do. St. John, stone sculpture, late 16th century or perhaps early 17th century. To the point, no doubt, work of art. Pain clearly etched in. Pieces such as this, sometimes I wonder if I should have turned to liturgical art. The profound sorrow as we see in St. John's face, or in the Virgin's, makes me sometimes doubt my decision to...
Effie, we're not here for this.
Well, nothing wrong with doubt, Edwin. It forces us to think.
A time and a place.
The lecture is Catholic art, after all. Me and my brother Jim, on his motorcycle. A bonus. Can't quite make up my cleft at this distance. Inherited from my father. Still, I was told such afflictions were more likely to be passed down through women than men. That is what we believed then. What I resented most was being denied the idea of being a mother. To imagine being a mother would be to imagine a deformed child. I thought that was very cruel of them to not let one imagine. But what do they believe now? I have no idea. I've lost interest. I would have been a terrible mother, much too spoiled. And artists as parents, well, not the best. I've seen that. Anyway, had close friends. My chum Ethel, and later in the church, nuns and priests I could count on. How privileged to know and be accepted by people such as Edwin. And I had, in a way, a child, a boy, Peter. Not a fantasy, Ethel's son, my godson. We were having fun, weren't we, Jim and I? He drove his motorcycle very fast. Faster than I drive my car.
And that would take some doing. She calls her car blasphemia.
Oh, better than cursing it. I don't know what we were in such a hurry about. The stained glass window depicting the life of Saint Catherine. Catherine was a mystic and a martyr. Her father, more practical, an artist. Takes a martyr to make an artist seem practical, doesn't it? Catherine's father was a dyer of textiles in Siena. He outlived his daughter. Not surprising. Most martyrs are young, sometimes children. But our window. The glass glows. Amber, vermilion, emerald, broken into 1,000 hues of red and blue, producing a glittering jewel-like whole. Here again, we are meeting order and variety, the foundation of all the arts. A flute on the side table with a vase of geraniums, painted by my friend Ethel. You can see her talent. Promise her. Takes work. But her instinctive understanding of the afternoon light, its effect on us, pleasant, warm, suggesting solitude, sitting by a window, light pouring in, dozing off into eternity. Another still life, a masterpiece, Dutch, Peter Class, 1600 to 1661. Something eternal about a still life. Still life. As if time has stopped and life is on hold. Something we all wish for now and then. The artist drowned himself after the accidental death of his son. People in the church say that's wrong, suicide. Well, he was a passionate man. To lose a son is a terrible thing. The focal point of Class's composition? Perhaps the peeled lemon on the pewter plate. Remember what I said about Manet. But about Class's pewter plate, like the flute in Ethel's painting, in both light coming in from an angle, creating a diagonal plane and tension on the canvas, as opposed to landscapes, with a distant horizon and generally horizontal plane, dissipating tension. Landscapes often inspire a sense of quiet, perhaps well-being. You breathe easier. Why I think so many of us like landscapes, especially in these times. We can escape into them, like a Sunday drive in the country. By Ethel, incidentally. You can see her becoming good. The Procession to Calvary, Flemish tapestry, early 16th century. Imagine. Executed by skilled Flemish craftsmen from drawings by the masters. The craft descending from father to son, many pieces taking years to complete, for only a few inches could be woven in a day. In Italy, Raphael himself designed tapestries, the great Raphael. Sometimes I can overly, go off this way and that, no telling, don't know myself. Maybe that's why my life needed structure. And that's one thing the church offers. And if it was good enough for Raphael...
Was it? You tell me, Effie. Was it good enough for the great Raphael?
Well, if we're to judge by his art...
Then you say yes?
Then yes.
Thank you.
And well, let's be honest. The church was offering a place, a home for my art. The real world offers no such assurance. The Annunciation, Florentine Agnolo Gotti, born in 1346, died in 1396, reached 50, not bad for them, and a natural death.
Thank God.
We think. Naturalistic qualities alone are of no great importance in ecclesiastical painting, because the function of religious art is to raise the heart and mind above nature. See, Edwin, yet another piece of liturgical art.
Amazing.
As I noted earlier, the bishop and I had quite a tussle over the title of this lecture, over the word Catholic.
Now, Effie...
The bishop felt if we didn't say notes on art for Catholics, then Catholics wouldn't come. What kind of faith is that in those of you who are Catholic? And what are you saying? Protestants would come?
Our Protestant friends are always welcome, Effie. You know that. I'm sure we have a few with us this evening.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. Because in Ireland, the country of Bishop O'Hara's origin, with my mother decades ago, we arrived. In the Isle of Saints, 'tis watery dawn, I buy a Belfast paper and read of Catholics hating Protestants, and Protestants hating Catholics, and bloody violence. Sad, I turn the pages and peruse the advertisements offering employment. Wanted, Catholic for bricklaying. Needed, boot boy, must be Protestant. Wanted, Catholic kitchen maid. Ladies corset salesman, Protestant preferred. I say, can't a Catholic demonstrate a corset, a Protestant lay a brick? So, too much separation already. And look what it's got us. Hate and war. The Nut House. My house, Monterey, California. Well, that is what we call it. A scene of many lively parties, some minor transgressions. I recall poets, writers, photographers, successes, failures, all seemed promising then, death far away. There was a journalist, a poet turned stonemason, railroad man turned poet, mother of a war hero, this war, home now, she tending his wounds, but alive. I think of my brother Jim, God knows where. I know you're thinking of someone as we huddle here safe for time. Well, you can do this with any group photo. Look back this way. Did this painting, the gossips. They're talking, gossiping about us. I look out in the morning from the nut house. There they'd be. This was before the First War. A Greek chorus. Their husbands and sons off fishing like St. Ives. That's what I understood. Gossip, a way to distract themselves from watching the sky, black clouds, churning white caps. So they turn, look inward, land, not sea. More dangerous, though, St. Ives in the Atlantic than Monterey in the Pacific. Still, both killed, and those killed often so young, they who venture out too far. In the big world, the old people do be leaving things after them for their sons and children. But in this place, it is the young men do be leaving things behind for them that do be old. Do you recognize the writer, Edwin?
Could it be J.M. Singh?
Yes. John Millington Singh, Riders to the Sea, the grieved Mara speaking, so like these Monterey women. We must have seemed stupid and shallow to them, rowdy and spoiled. Life so hard for them, and us given everything.
You were Effie?
Oh, simply thinking of lost people who had been given everything. Madonna and child, damaged, so part Madonna, part child. 14th century, French limestone, has that remote quality of dignity desirable in religious art, compared to, well, put it this way, does she need a halo? Interesting. A work of art, even if severely damaged, holds our attention. We imagine the rest, don't we? Want to complete the image in our heads. The Madonna's hand, the child's face. Or the injury to the artwork becomes real, feeds our religious fervor.
Always a good thing.
Not always. Remember Ireland and Easter week. There's no good in that.
You see, she sets traps.
Saint Peter by Velázquez. Now here is artistic religious fervor, a different and totally acceptable thing. Of course, I'm biased. Note the boat in the background. Velázquez reminding us Peter's a fisherman. Important. Velázquez is concerned with Peter's emotional state, more than portraiture. So any preconceived notion we have of his likeness becomes secondary to his grief. Christ awakening his disciples in Gethsemane, by me in California, Mission Carmel. Crucifix, waiting. He knows, but also waiting for Christ, the comfort of angels. I agonized over this painting, put all I had into it, everything. Not altogether happy with it, but it has a kind of presence. A study by me again. Here, composition is all. Design, simplicity, and you can see I've kept my love of color. An angel, the man, Peter again, of Peter. A name very dear to me. Showed this earlier. Painting by Ethel? I didn't say. The flute was Peter's, my godson's, Ethel's boy. Here he is, as a child, Peter. Such a fine boy, so much promise. I wrote to his mother about that time. Ethel, my dear, I am sending my godson, your Peter, a charming wool sweater, knit by the wife of a St. Ives fisherman, knit to fill the waiting hours. I hope he likes it. Tell him his godmother loves him and thinks of him as she watches the children run and play on the beaches here. They think me funny, the children, laugh at me, at my mouth. It is so odd to have people look at your mouth, not into your eyes, as you did. Why, I love you. The worst is, they make fun of my painting. Peek over my shoulder and yell, look, she can't get it right. The painting's all crooked. I hope Peter's keeping you on your toes. It will be good exercise for you if, as I suspect, you are no longer painting. Tell Peter not to forget his extra parent here in St. Ives. Then at age 17, Peter is made first secretary of the Sierra Club. Imagine that. St. Ives after sunset. Mine. Fewer unmannerly children at that time of day. Safer. I did some of my best painting in St. Ives. It was on my first trip to St. Ives that I learned Ethel had married. A military man, handsome, stood quite straight, good man. In Saint-Tropez in France, I heard Ethel was pregnant with Peter. Well, anyone who forgets her paint box, there's no telling. I knew our friendship would never be the same. Selfish of me, of course. Do you know, if you get lost in the Sierra, there is a hut named in Peter's honor by the Sierra Club where you can find food and blankets. It's called Peter's Hut. It has saved lives. A mountain in the Sierra. Note the notch in it. A climber wrote, the rock is metaphoric. One must hold the rock together with one hand while he climbs it with the other. Peter wrote that. Mountain 2 is named after Peter. Perhaps someday I will visit it and paint it. I do miss doing landscapes. Ethel. Note her eyes looking down. The light coming in from the right, softening her profile. The person who took this photograph understands strong composition. I must admit, I've railed against photography, but this is a moving picture, taken some time after Ethel learned of Peter's death. Sadness in her eyes. This taken of Peter shortly before he died. That was so long ago, somewhere in Europe, after I had returned home. All those years in France and Great Britain, when I might have been of use, could have perhaps rushed to his side, but he was alone, his extra parent of no help. An educational trip before college. We still don't know how he died. What killed him? Just 18. A mystery. I think of Peter Klaas losing his son, St. Catherine's father, the mothers of the Irish fishermen. He do believe in things behind for them that do be old. Sing, remember? Edwin's favorite Irish writer.
Okay, C2.
I never did box Peter's ears. Wish I had. Think I frightened him a bit, though. He was always on his best behavior around me. So, we lost Ethel, too. She abandoned her faith. A Protestant, by the way, a proud Episcopalian. Can a Catholic be a godmother to a Protestant? Awkward. But if a Catholic can model a corset, a Protestant lay a brick, why then such miracles it can be done. So Ethel consulted mystics, some dark spirits in search of Peter. She became removed from her family And for me, I couldn't enter her world. We had no meeting point. When you have such grief, I couldn't bear thinking of her that way. So this painting, Ethel and myself, the early days, just finished it days ago, paint still wet. Haven't even shown it to Edwin.
Yeah.
We're painting together, laughing. I was so proud of painting it that I could recapture something that of that time so long ago. We were happy then, and that was enough. Painted so many years after, because time is needed to distill ideas and emotions. So, I'm not sure, but didn't I admit that a photograph can be a work of art? That the photograph of Ethel? I think I did. That's something, isn't it? That I work at it, moving into the 20th century. A little late, but can be open-minded about what is and isn't art. We'll end with the Catholic piece. In honor of Edwin O'Hara, Bishop of Kansas City. You've seen it before. Art is our understanding of beauty, as necessary in the church today as in our daily lives, as it always has been. We'll meet in the lobby for tea. What do you say? Shall we?
Good job.
You want to say the last line?
Yeah. Thank you. I'm still going to film the last line.
There's a line to go.
Okay, Effie, did you notice the miracle?
What?
The projector didn't jam. Thank you.